place. I guess it was 3 or 4 years ago. I came to just look around and what's happening in GIC, and I brought some of my students. And then that time it was across from this building, so when I coming to this place today, I was wondering if I was coming on the right way. But I'm very happy to be back to this place, and I'd like to thank Professor Shin and GIC for giving me this opportunity to share my ideas with you. When I was asked to give a talk here, I was thinking what would be the good topic for me to share with you. And then just because I'm an ELT professional and I've been working for teaching English and teaching teachers for many, many years, I thought maybe that is the thing that I need to talk about. And particularly because since, I guess, 2007, which is the year right after I came back from my sabbatical year that I spent in Australia. Spending 1 year in Australia was quite an eye-opener for me, because until then I've been living in, so to speak, American English zone. And theoretically I knew about the differences in the sounds and the way of speaking English in British accent or Australian or New Zealand accents. But while I was in Australia, it was a totally different experience. And then, and also I was lucky enough to meet this professor, Richard Baldoff. He's actually a big name in the area of language planning and critical pedagogy, which were two new areas for me. And then as I worked with him for 1 year, I became very much interested in this new topic of critical pedagogy, particularly how to apply this idea to teaching English for Korean students and many English as a foreign language students. So what I'm going to talk about today is what I've been talking in many different places, in many different Asian countries, through conferences and workshops and seminars. Some of you might already have some idea about what critical pedagogy is and what English as an international language means. But what I'd like to share with you today is kind of how to apply that idea to, if you're a teacher, to teach your students, and if you're a language learner, how to apply that idea to your language learning experience. So hopefully you can have some ideas. So today my topic is how to become a creative, critical, and successful users of English. And since we are all here in Korea, I think I thought it would be good if you have some big picture of how language teaching in Korea has been developed. So I'm going to give you a brief in ELT in Korea, and then there's some terminology related to teaching English, learning English, and all. So I'm going to share some of those terminologies. And then this English as an international language, the acronym EIL stands for English as an International Language. And I'm going to tell you what's the goal of learning EIL. And then my main topic, which is how to become a creative, critical, and successful user of EIL, focusing on how to analyze your needs as a language learner, and then how to build more meaningful learning experience. Then I'll give you some conclusions and suggestions. So let's start with ELT in Korea. If you are an English teacher or English education major, you might have heard this before, but the very first English school, the official English language training school, which is called Dongmunha, was founded in 1883. So if you can count, this year it's been like about more than 200 years, right? And that particular school was to train a few number of professional interpreters and translators. So it was a school only for a small group of students. And then several curious fluctuations in terms of starting age of students learning English, which means up until 1996, all the Korean students started to learn English officially in grade 7. But starting 1997, it became grade 3, right? And then ELT goals, which used to be focusing on developing literacy skills, but now we are focusing more on communicative skills, particularly on the spoken language skills. And then instructional method. Obviously, grammar translation method was the ever-dominant method, and just theoretically, well, to some extent, realistically as well, there are many new teaching methodologies have been introduced to Korean English classrooms. And then testing and evaluation. For example, up until 1993, we didn't have any spoken language portion in language testing. But in 1994, listening test was introduced, included as part of college entrance exam. And that has a huge washback effect, which means the learner is starting to focus on their listening skill because it is a part of a test, right? And then the nation's historical and socio-political drives made all these fluctuations. And then the influence of the major trends in schools of psychology, linguistics, and other related disciplines developed in Western countries like USA and the UK on ELT in Korea are all reflected in the revised national curricula. If you know already, Korea has a national curriculum, which means throughout the nation, every school, every teacher, every student use the same textbook, same curriculum, right? Maybe not the same teaching methods, but the main framework is the same. So we call it a national curriculum. And then for some regular periods, the Ministry of Education revises this national curriculum. And then every time they revise the new the national curriculum, they put new concept of, as you can see on the screen, the new ideas from the psychology, linguistics, and other related disciplines. In short, English has been taught as a foreign language throughout the Korean ELT history. And there's no doubt, because Korea is one very typical EFL context. And what does EFL stand for? English as a foreign language. What does that mean? English as a foreign language. How is it different from English as a second language? Does anybody know? Basically, when we call English as a foreign language, that means English does not have any official status in that context. So in Korea, English is one of school subjects, and it is an important foreign language that we teach and learn in the school setting, right? But it does not have any official status. So that is what we call English as a foreign language. But then, the 2008 revised national curriculum adopted this new concept of English as an international language. So if you look at this, the new curriculum, it clearly states that English is defined as an international language. And then the new goal of teaching English in Korea is now to help students to become intercultural speaker of English. So we don't say anything about, we try to help our students to become like a native speaker. So it's not the goal of teaching English in Korea. Okay? Alright. So let's go through some terminology to kind of have a some picture of teaching English and learning English. So first, English as a second language. That means English is a daily life means of communication in this particular context, right? And then many people have their own native language other than English. So those people learn and use English as their second language. Korea is not ESL context. We are EFL context. English for speakers of other languages. The acronym is ESOL. ESOL. Okay? English for speakers of other languages. And then EFL, of course, English as a foreign language. ELT, which is means English language teaching. In Korea and in many Asian countries, English education is used a lot. Probably more than ELT, but ELT is more kind of native speaker term. And teaching English as a second language, which is called TESOL, or teaching English to speakers of other languages, that is TESOL, right? TESOL or TESOL, whichever you can pronounce. And some years ago, starting with Sunmyeong Women's University in Korea, they started to use this term TESOL. But actually, that doesn't really differ from English education, what we used to have, right? But ever since the Sunmyeong Women's University started to have this new program of TESOL, now many Korean universities have two different programs, English education and TESOL. And I think that's absurd, because basically they're the same, right? And then what they say is English education is more theory-oriented and TESOL is more practice-oriented. But in reality, there's no clear distinction between theory and practice, right? Particularly when you talk about language learning and language teaching, theory and practice should be combined, right? So anyway, so TESOL stands for Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. And teaching English as a foreign language, that is TEFL. Right? There are some more, like English as an additional language. So mostly, in addition to your native language, whatever that is, if you learn or teach another language, then that is called English as an additional language. And English as an international language, and I'm going to extend this term a little bit later, more in detail. And English as a lingua franca. Actually, EIL and ELF are kind of exchangeable terminology, so different scholars use different terms, but mostly they're exchangeable. Lingua franca means common language. And English for special purposes or English for specific purposes. Recently, Korea, this particular field is developing quite rapidly because there are a great need of this particular field. So English for specific purposes include like English for medical sciences or medical doctors or business people or different fields, right? So that's called English for specific purposes. And then English for academic purposes, if you teach English at mostly college level, then you teach probably how to write good essays, things like that. That will be this, English for academic purposes. And then English language learner, that is ELL. And then limited English proficiency, that is LEP. So if you have some students who have limited English proficiency, then they are called LEP students. So there are some researchers and scholars or teachers who want to develop some strategies to teach these LEP students because they are not the same as advanced students, right? So LEP. And then culturally and linguistically diverse. Particularly in, I guess, USA or in many sort of melting pot countries, immigrant countries, they have very culturally diverse students in one classroom, right? When I went to United States, it was 1987, and then my son was very young, and when he went to pre-kindergarten in Texas, his class had 19 students, and there were 11 different language-speaking kids. So very, very diverse, right? And the teacher was a monolingual English speaker. So that kind of situation. So this monolingual English-speaking teacher has to deal with all these culturally, linguistically diverse students. So this term came from that kind of context. In Korea, I don't think we have this problem yet, but since Korean society is becoming more like a multicultural society, as we have more multicultural families, by having lots of international women married to Korean men, and now they're having children, so they're coming to schools, and then if they speak some other language than Korean, and then if you as an English teacher teach them English, then it will be quite culturally, linguistically diverse class, right? But I don't think we have this problem that seriously yet. And the last one, LOTE, this particular term is used in Australia and New Zealand. And then they have a LOTE program, which is languages other than English. So English is their official first language. And then all these schools in Australia and New Zealand encourage many schools to teach some other foreign languages because there are many immigrant people. And the Korean was one of these LOTE languages, luckily. So just remember these terms for just your reference. Now, have you heard this term, native speakerism? Are you familiar with this term? No? You know what native speaker is, right? So what is native speaker? Who do you think native speaker is? Then do you think you are a native speaker? Of Korean, yes, and of English, and maybe of Japanese or Filipinos, right? So we are all some kind of native speaker. Then why? What makes a native speaker? When you learn a language as your first language at your very young age. Basically, that's the term. That's the definition that we use for a native speaker. Then what is native speakerism? It is the established belief or bias that native speakers of a language with or without teaching credentials are better qualified to teach that language. If that's English, then to teach English, native speaker of English is better qualified to teach than non-native speakers. And take a note, the parenthesis, with or without teaching credentials. So maybe that is the reason why we call it as a bias. If you are a teacher, then you should have some sort of teaching credentials, right? But without teaching credentials, just because you are a native speaker, many people have this expectation and belief that, oh, you should be a good English teacher because you speak English as your native language. So that kind of idea is called native speakerism. There are some assumptions that native speakers are the authorities of the language. Authorities of the language, which means native speakers have intuition. They don't learn the language in school, but subconsciously they know how to use it. And then they use the language just naturally, right? So they are the authorities and enjoy superior competence compared to the language learners or non-native speakers, right? And those who use it as an additional language, which means language learners, like EFL learners or ESL learners, have to treat native speaker competence as the target, which means the goal of learning EFL, English as a foreign language, should be like after you learn English, you should become like a native speaker. But remember, this is just an assumption. I'm not talking about this is true. This is assumption, which is what many people think and expect. Right? And native speakers are the best qualified to teach that language. Why? Because they are native speakers. Then here we can see and we can just project there will be some problems with this idea. Right? Because teaching English obviously is one very professional field, which requires, again, professional teaching credentials, experience, education, and interest. Right? So, why am I talking about this idea, native speakerism? Because in Korea, in many EFL contexts, many learners and teachers have a very strong faith, belief in native speakerism. And then the result, these language learners and teachers become very incompetent. They feel like they're not competent and they're not confident because they are not native speakers. So that's why native speakerism becomes a problem. Okay? Being a native speaker has nothing to do with any problem. It is a good thing, right? But having this belief, bias against non-native speakers, that's the problem. Okay? Now, fortunately, now the concept of native speaker is declining, and then many scholars. Actually, there's one. Can't remember the name, but there's a book. Native speaker is dead. Yeah, that's the name of the book. That means when people think of native speaker, they always expect an ideal, perfect speaker. But there's no such a thing as perfect, ideal speaker in the whole world. Even in your native language, you always make some kind of slips of tongues or errors and mistakes, right? So there's no one single person who can be perfect or ideal kind of speaker. So in that sense, there's no such a thing as native speaker. Okay? But don't feel offended if you feel if you think you are a native speaker of English. I'm not offending you. This is what the scholars are saying, and in a sense, it's true, right? Okay. Now, I'd like you to recognize this and remember this also, which is called three circles. And there's a name of the person who proposed this idea, Kachuru. Brans Kachuru is an Indian American scholar, and he proposed this idea instead of distinguishing people just by calling them native speakers and non-native speakers. We should have more differentiated levels. And then he proposed to have three circles. So innermost circle called inner circle, which refers to those countries where English is used as a first language, right? So as you can see, USA, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Ireland. And then the second circle, which is called outer circle, includes India, Pakistan, Singapore, Malaysia, the Philippines, Kenya, Nigeria, and those countries. Then you can guess what is the common thing among these countries. Yes, exactly. So through colonization, these countries adopted English as their official language or second language. So in these countries, English has some sort of official status. Okay? So our circle is mostly the place where English is learned as a second language, not EFL. And the expanded circle includes Korea. So without any need of explaining, English is mostly taught as a school subject, right? So Korea, Japan, China, Russia, Sweden, many Asian countries, many European countries. Okay, so remember this. Now, let me elaborate English as a foreign language a little bit more to compare to English as an international language later. First of all, English as a foreign language means the use of English in a non-English speaking region like Korea. And then, typically, English is learned either to pass exams as a necessary part of one's education or for a career progression. And then, maybe part of the state school curriculum in countries where English has no special status. And then, it may also be supplemented by lessons paid for privately. And the students are literate in their mother tongue. Right? The last part. Something or someone that is foreign comes from or relates to a country that is not your own. I think this is very important concept. When you think of English as a foreign language, that is like the analogy that I used in the introduction of this talk. Like wearing a rental dress. When you are wearing somebody else's clothes, how do you feel? When the dress is a really nice one, you may feel really fancy, happy, excited, but you will, at the same time, you will be nervous because of making some damage, because it's not yours. So, likewise, when you speak English as a foreign language, just because English comes from a country that is not your own, you feel like it's not your language. So whenever you speak this language, you feel like there's something missing, something's wrong, right? So, and my English is not good enough. So that kind of feeling comes from the idea of English as a foreign language. Okay? Then how we are going to overcome this nervousness. So when we had this nice guy who introduced my talk, he was nervous. Why? Because probably he feels like speaking English is still something that is not part of himself. He feels like he's using somebody else's something, right? So that kind of foreignness, that always keeps Korean learners feel like there's something wrong with my English. Right? So the point of my talk today is to overcome this thinking that English is a foreign language. English is not foreign language, it is my language. Okay? Because now English is an international language. What does that mean? EIL, English as an international language, is used both for international communication and in a local sense as a language of wider communication within multilingual societies. I just told you that Korea is becoming more multicultural, multilingual society, right? So still, Korea is not English-speaking region officially, but in many contexts, like today, we are here in Gwangju, Korea, right? But I'm speaking English to you, and you're listening, and we are going to have some interaction later in English. So this is a perfect case of using English as an international language. And there are some native speakers of English, there are many non-native speakers of English, doesn't matter, as long as we can communicate using this same language. That is what English as an international language is all about. Right? Now, the use of EIL is no longer connected to the culture of inner circle countries. Remember inner circle countries? We used to teach in our schools 영미 문화, which means English-speaking culture. What does that mean? American culture, British culture, that was it. But now, English is spoken in many, many different countries, many, many different contexts. So, knowing about American culture, British culture is good, but that is not all, right? So, the more diverse cultures you know, the better. So that's what we're talking about. Now remember Gangnam Style. Have you watched that music video? Style is an English word, right? Gangnam is Korean word. Now it's combined in Korean word. So English is embedded in Korean culture. So that's how English as an international language is utilized, and it is more expanded, right, in Korean context. So that's how the EIL is kind of utilized in Korean context. So now English as a foreign language has totally different function from that of EIL. That's why I'm talking about this particular topic for you. Now, EIL is to enable speakers to share with others their ideas and culture. So this is the key of teaching and learning English as an international language. Share your own ideas, your feelings with others who have different language and cultural background. Okay? And another most important thing for you to remember is EIL belongs to you, because you use this language for your own purpose. Okay? So it doesn't matter whether you make some errors, mistakes, as long as you can communicate with someone. Okay? But we of course, we need to have some kind of a borderline that we shouldn't go beyond, because there should be some sort of common framework. Otherwise, nobody will understand. Nobody's, right? So we should have some sort of common kind of framework that we share so that we can communicate. But it doesn't have to be one single standard, one single rule. Okay? So that is the basic concept of English as an international language. Now, goals of learning English. Number one is to ensure intelligibility. What does that mean? Understandable. Okay? So, like if you, we have some foreign participants here. When you talk to Korean speakers of English, what is the most difficult thing that you understand? The pronunciation? The grammar mistake? Or what? Grammar. Pronunciation. Okay, I know because I've been teaching English to Korean students. There are some Korean students who do not distinguish P and F or R and L, and that kind of pronunciation errors, right? But so there should be some kind of borderline for them to be able to be understood by others, right? So we need to teach them how to be intelligible, how to be understood by the other people, right? So, but it's not like you have to become like a native speaker. That has a totally different concept. So, to ensure intelligibility and to develop strategies to achieve comedy. Comedy means have a friendly relationship with others. So, for example, when you have some students who still have some problem with P and F, you need to teach them how to make and correctly, but at the same time, if some students do not still handle how to distinguish these two phonemes, then the next thing that you need to do is to how they cope with this problem. For example, when they make P for both P and F, they can spell the word for their partner, and then when they don't understand it, this is what I mean. Okay? That's one strategy. So something like that. So first thing, you teach the correct sound and how to make it. And then next thing you need to do, when they cannot still make it, then how they are going to handle that problem difficulty. That is called strategy. So you as a teacher, you can help them, or them as a language learner, they can develop their own strategy. Okay? So strategies are very, very important in learning and teaching English as an international language, because we can never become a perfect speaker whatsoever. You will make some kind of errors and mistakes. But that doesn't mean that you have to stop your conversation. You have to somehow continue, carry on your conversation, right? Then you need to have some kind of strategy to make yourself understood by others. Okay. To develop textual confidence. Textual. Now Korean people are kind of frenzy about speaking English. What are you going to talk about? I ask my students, they want to be able to speak English, so I asked them one day. So, let's say you have a perfect English speaking ability. What would you like to talk about? Nothing much, actually. So, I think many people have this kind of fancy about speaking English whatsoever. But what matters is what you can talk about. What you would like to talk about. Right? The content. The content. And the contents that you have in your mind and your heart doesn't have to be spoken. You can write that. Right? So textual confidence is another very, very important language skill, particularly in the context of English as an international language. Okay? Now, then how to become a creative, critical, and successful user of English? This is not my idea, but I just collected some ideas from many different books and papers. First of all, analyze your needs. What do you need to become a good language learner and speaker? And then try to build more meaningful language learning and using experience. Okay? So, and then again, develop and utilize your own interaction strategies. So first of all, you need to know what kind of learning difficulties and problems you have. And then based upon that need analysis, you need to build your own strategies to overcome those problems. Right? Okay, so now let's talk about the analyzing your needs. Check if you have a strong reason for learning the language. Why do you learn English in the first place? To get a good job, to go overseas, to meet a nice-looking American guy to marry later, things like that. So you need to have many or specific reasons for why you learn the language. Otherwise, maybe you may be interested in learning English for some time, but after that you'll be bored and you will lose interest because you don't know why. Okay? So learning why you need to learn English is very important. Now, seek out opportunities to use the target language and make maximum use of them. I think I should congratulate all of you here because you are here to use the language, right? For very meaningful purpose. You're not here to practice your language, but use your language, right? Listen to someone speaking, and then you will probably ask some questions. You will share your ideas with other people. That's the real purpose of using English outside of English classroom. So you need to find the more opportunities to use your language. Now, supplement natural learning with conscious study. Well, there's some people who learn English by picking up the words, like in many vocational settings, right? So obviously their English is very limited. They're very good at doing their own job, but other than their working place, they don't know what to say at all. Right? There are many people like that. And so, for them, they need to have some sort of study. Okay? So language can be learned naturally in a natural setting, but that is not all. Particularly for people like us. Because Korea is not naturally a language learning, English learning context. Not yet. Now, respond positively to learning situations, avoiding anxiety and inhibitions. making some mistakes, no big deal, right? So try to kind of get rid of your anxiety. I think Koreans are not shy. Many people say, don't be shy. Koreans are not shy. They're very self-conscious. They're very proud. That's why they don't want to speak up, because they don't want to show that they may make some mistakes. Okay, so being shy is not the same as being conscious or proud, right? They're very different. So if you're not Koreans and you're teaching Korean students, then you should understand this and try to build your own strategy, how to help Korean people sort of break their self-consciousness. Okay? So anxiety, don't be anxious too much. And then if you are able to analyze, categorize, and remember language forms and monitor errors, that is a very good kind of language learning habit. Now, so check yourself. This is kind of a checklist. And see if you are prepared to experiment with language and be willing to take risks. Again, making mistakes, no big deal. Just go ahead and try what you'd like to say. And then if that is communicative, then people will understand you and then let go. But if there's some problem with your speech, then they will not understand. Then they will stop you somehow. Like they will kind of raise their brows, or they will not respond to you immediately, things like that. Then you will kind of immediately see, I'm not understood now. Then what am I going to do? Right? So take risks and then see what happens. And then go to the next level. And so that's where you need your strategy as well. And if you are flexible and capable of adapting to different learning conditions, right? When you are in this kind of interactive kind of context, or when you are in a very formal setting, or when you are in a very large class, things like that. And so if you are flexible or not, check. So if you are all kind of checked on each item, you are a very good language learner. And if you are not in somewhere, then you need to become a good language learner. So I think I should go faster. Now, how to build more meaningful English learning experience? Many scholars say there are optimal conditions for language learning. So remember these conditions. Number one, exposure. Okay? So get exposed and use. So listening to English is important, but listening only doesn't help. So listen and then try to use it. And then motivation to listen and read the language, and instruction. So listen, try to speak, and then read and write. But if you are the only one that helps you to learn, then all the other kind of errors, mistakes will be just remain. So you need to have someone or some help, right, to correct or to interact, things like that. So in instruction, motivation, use, exposure. These are optimal conditions. Now, so what are you going to do? What you should do? Create more opportunities to use the target language for real purpose. So come to GIC program every week, number one. Or listen to GFN. What was the GFN? Gwangju for Foreigners Network. It's a radio, English speaking radio program. It has very many good programs. So create more opportunities. Select tasks and activities. If you are a good singer, like me, I'm a good singer. So I use music a lot to present myself. Okay? And then sing and then explain the song in English. So that kind of activity that you feel confident and you enjoy doing. Okay? So English learning doesn't have to be somewhat with the language itself. it can have some more other activities or talents that you have. Use the materials in such a way that you can reflect on your own culture. Learning about somebody else's culture is important, but if that's all, that's not really meaningful to you. You should be able to personalize your learning experience so it's somewhat related to your own culture. Okay? So what I don't like is when we use this commercial English conversation book, every single conversation book has chapter 1 with some kind of a party context. Party. So when you go to a party, when you meet someone, how to introduce yourself. That is not really Korean, the context where many Korean people can actually experience. It's very artificial. So you can make some kind of similar context where Korean students, Korean learners actually can experience. Not real party, but some kind of party, but not like American party. Okay? So that the learners, Korean people, can relate their learning experience to themselves. Okay? So that they can make their own stories, not just hearing about somebody else's. My conclusion. Focus on ensuring intelligibility of your own pronunciation and build confidence. If you are not confident in yourself, try to find what is the problem. And then try to find your strategy. Do not get stuck with the problem. Don't stop there, but move on, but you need to have some strategy. Okay? So spelling the word, or say, when you cannot differentiate the number 14 or 40, particularly when you talk on the phone. You need to make sure. You mean 40? Things like that. So spell out. So there will be many different strategies that overcome your difficulties. Now develop your own tips and strategies I just told you. So now let's not talk about if you're a native speaker or not. So no more native or non-native issue. But we need to concern with whether you are a successful language learner or not. And if you are not successful, what is the problem? What's wrong? And then trying to develop your strategy to overcome the difficulties. And you'll see these people. Henry Kissinger, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Han Ki-moon, Kofi Annan, they're not native speakers, but they are very brilliant English speakers. In the whole world, everybody recognizes them as good language speakers, right? They're not called, they're not labeled. They shouldn't be labeled as non-native speakers of English because they are good language speakers, like us. Okay? So successful users. Then what are we going to do with English? First thing that we can do as Korean users of English is to share our own culture with other people. So tell them about our culture, dance, music, things like that. So I sang in China for international conference, and just this past June I went to Indonesia. I was invited as a keynote speaker, and then at the reception they asked me to sing. So I sang some Korean songs, and actually they remembered my song more than my speech. So, but anyway, I think that was a very good way of sharing my culture in English. The second thing, as a Korean, we can go overseas and then learn their culture. And in English, because we don't speak their language, they don't speak our language. Our common language is English. So English serves as a common language. So China, Japan, Malaysia, Indonesia, and many other countries. Now, within Korean context, we can still use English for very meaningful, purposeful reasons. These photos are taken all at my university. Just up until the end of June, I was the director of international culture education. So I hosted many language learning and culture learning activities. So we had English presentation contest, and then international culture fair, and then TOEIC programs. And then if you can recognize some of the Filipino faces, some of them are here. And I had some teacher training program for Filipino ladies. So these kind of programs are all very meaningful, not only for me, but for them and for the community as well. I was going to share some, just a part of my video clip, but do I have time or should I stop? Just briefly then. This is
actually this song was written by one of our Indonesian members, and we awarded her $500 for making this song. So this is a very expensive song. So it goes like this.
The reason why I'd like to share this video with you is just to show how I presented the song, why I presented the song, because it was part of my opening speech at the international conference, because I was the conference chair. And then I could just make a speech, but I intentionally put this song because music has a very powerful meaning, and then people can remember that more vividly after this whole event. So I intentionally included this song as part of my speech, and it was quite successful. So that's why I'd like to share that too. Okay.
We teach our global language to open doors to new opportunities, knowledge and worlds. With art we guard our traditions, we stand firm on our native grounds. We come from different lands, but we are one in a circle of dedicated professionals. We all gathered here to forge strong links, broaden horizons, share our lives, become the best teachers you can be, and open pathways through this universe. In the air we hear a vibrant harmony, a sound of people united for one goal. Peace through friendship, knowledge prosperity. In nation of we will grow.
Well, this is all I prepared for you. So thank you very much.
Now it's time for the Q&A portion of the talk. If you didn't receive a piece of paper when you came in, please raise your hand and one of our volunteers can give one to you. Okay. Please refrain from raising your hand and asking a question. I will ask the questions to the speaker. So I would like to start off with a question about the idea of native speakerism. How do you feel about the system in place in Korea where so many native speakers come to teach and their only qualification is being a native speaker? Do you think it should be changed? And could we get enough teachers to fill the need if teaching credentials were required?
I think this is a very good and important question, and I've been actually writing about this particular issue in many articles. There are two ways that we can sort of solve this, if we call it problem. Number one, now as you all know, we have two government programs called EPIC and TALK, which is the foreign teacher recruiting or employment program. And these two programs actually are the typical case of native speakerism because the number one criteria, eligibility of the applicants, is to become a inner circle country citizen. And they don't focus on their teaching credentials or like education or experience at all. But if they have some sort of experience or education, they can have a little bit higher salary. So that's how they compensate their teaching credential, but they're not required. So then how we are going to resolve this problem? Number one, we should sort of strengthen the credentials of the eligibility of the foreign teachers. Second, there's no way that we can recruit enough number of native speaking teachers who are highly qualified. That's the reality. Because we cannot pay all that high competitive salary to all these qualified, highly qualified teachers. So there will be some teachers who are not highly qualified but can function to some extent. So the second resolution that we can do is to make some sort of different kind of job descriptions, not only as a classroom instruction. There are many different functions that native speaking teachers can serve, like as a program organizer. The program doesn't have to be language learning program. There are many thematic programs, and luckily all these native English speaking teachers have BA degree. They are college educated people. They are educated people. So they have their own kind of experience and then gifts and talents. So we should find out some ways that we can utilize their talents and gifts other than teaching English. So that's how we can sort of utilize these human resources.
Excellent. So your idea of English as an international language and the idea that English belongs to you as a speaker of English, even not a native speaker, is very attractive. You talked a lot about strategies for improving English, but could you maybe talk about how to get students to buy into the idea that English belongs to them, that it's not something separate from them?
Right. Well, recently I watched this TV show. Do you know Psy, one of the singer? He's actually now very famous with his music video, right? And he shared his experience that he had when he went to America to study. And then he said he was not a good English speaker. And he had a stomach problem and he had a very bad diarrhea. He went to a drugstore, but he didn't know the word diarrhea. So he started with, I have a problem. And then the pharmacist, right? Yes, I know. So what kind of problem? And he said, I have a big problem. And then, yeah, I understand. So tell me more about it. And then he said, I have a water shit. But that made them understand him perfectly, right? So that, I think that is a very good strategy. So, I mean, if he knew the word diarrhea, then he could have kind of saved his dignity more. But because he didn't know the word, but he tried, and then his communication was successful. So that is some kind of strategy that we kind of encourage our students to use. Do you agree or what? You have some sort of mixed kind of look on your face. Now I can see. Yeah. Did I answer?
Yeah, I think that was fine. Thank you. So for you personally, could you share what and when was the most important moment for you in your English language development?
Let's see. What and when?
Yeah, what was your most important moment for your English language development?
If I understood the question correctly, actually my English learning started just like anybody else in my generation, was in grade 7. And then I was lucky enough to have a very good English teacher, my very first English teacher. She had a very clear English pronunciation, and I was a very strongly motivated student as well. So I tried to remember all the words and sentences in the textbook. And then I recited on the way to go to school, come home, and everywhere I go, I just recited English. And then whenever I got to find the new book, English book, I tried to read and remember and try to write them down and things like that. So remembering, reciting was one very good sort of learning strategy for me. And then my other strategy was to again try to use the language. So what I did was when I went to college, there was no English conversation club in my university, so I made one. And then I gathered some students who had the same interest. So we gathered this meeting, and then so that's how I tried to use the language. What else? Things like that. So when I recollect the way how I learned English, I pretty much remember those optimal conditions of language learning. I think I satisfied mostly those optimal conditions for language learning. That's how I got this language ability.
You covered a lot of terms and acronyms earlier in your presentation. Could you maybe clarify again why English doesn't hold the status of ESL in Korea? And could you add what would have to happen in the future for English to achieve ESL status in Korea?
Well, first of all, as I told you, English as a second language context requires English to be the daily life means of communication. But I don't project that Korea will be one. Because Koreans will not give up their language. So Korean language will remain as their first language, and we will use this language for our daily life. But I know there are some people who kind of support the idea of making English as an official language. That means government, education, mass media should use English, but that costs a lot, and I don't see the need of making English as an official language yet. In the future, maybe, but I don't see yet. So I don't think Korea will become an English as a second language context.
Okay. So there are many different Englishes around the world, as you discovered in your time in Australia. So what is the standard for EIL?
Actually, there's no one single standard, and many people say that we do not need any one single standard anymore. But we need to have one model. So there's a difference between one standard, one model. If we have one standard, everybody has to follow that. But when you have one model, you can follow that, but there will be some other models as well, right? So you can choose from many different choices. So we are not talking about one standard, but we are now talking about one model. So which model of English we are going to choose? In Korean context, American English is one good model, but American English is not the only model. So that's the difference. So far, in Korean schools, American English has been one single, the model. And that created a lot of misconceptions that all the other Englishes, other than American English, is kind of second grade or non-standard. Even British English was not supported by many teachers. I clearly remember that one of my teacher trainer came to me after my class. She said she spent 2 years in UK, so she picked up some beautiful British accent. But when she came back to school to teach kids, the students didn't like her accent at all. And they always pointed her that, teacher, your English is strange, right? So she was kind of discouraged. So she asked me, should I give up my British accent? So I told her, no, you got this beautiful accent, right? And then many people in the world, maybe not Koreans, but many people in the world admire having this British accent. So you should keep, but you need to have teaching strategy, how to present it in a kind of favorable way, so that the students should not kind of point on you as a bad speaker of English, right? So then again, there's no one single standard that we should follow, but you need to have one model, good model. Okay?
So this leads into our final question for today. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question, please feel free to come up and ask the speaker directly after the talk. So segueing from this discussion of different types of English, could you maybe share some examples from your own experience of the surprising Australian English that you encountered? Were there any particularly funny stories from your experience?
Before sharing some Australian English, actually I studied in Texas. So when I went to Texas, I went to Texas A&M, and then they have this student orientation for international students. And the first phrase that they say to the international students is, howdy. Do you know what that means? How are you? Howdy. And then everybody has to repeat the person. So when the person said, howdy, then everybody says, howdy. So that was Texan English. And then when I was in Australia, they use might, which is mate, like a friend. Hi, mate. Things like that, right? Yeah. And they say uni for university, and then Mozzie for mosquito, right? And then Aussie for Australia. So they use a lot of short terms, okay? Yeah, things like that.
Okay. So that's the end of the Q&A portion of the talk. We'd like to thank the speaker again for answering our questions. So let's give her one more round of applause.
That's it. Very nice. Okay.
We have the same.
You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when I was gray. You don't know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away.